In the beginning, before time was counted, before there were days and nights, there existed only the Creator and His infinite power. He was the origin of all things, the foundation of the universe, and the hand that shaped existence. With a breath of His will, He brought the heavens and the earth to light, separating the waters and raising the mountains, painting the world with colors and forms never seen before. And at the heart of this creation, He planted a garden, a paradise of indescribable beauty, a place where life flourished in absolute harmony. This was the Garden of Eden, the jewel of creation, a home made with care, prepared to be inhabited by the one who would bear His image. Then, God formed the first man, Adam, from the dust of the earth. With His own hands, He shaped every detail of his body and, in the end, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And Adam opened his eyes and saw, for the first time, the grandeur of Eden. The rivers ran crystal clear, reflecting the light of the sun. The trees were lush, laden with delicious fruits. The animals walked freely, without fear, for there was still no pain or death. The air was pure, filled with the fragrance of flowers. The Creator looked at Adam and saw that it was good. But something was still missing. Although Adam lived in paradise, surrounded by all the creatures and the wonders of the garden, he was alone. Among all the living beings, there was no one like him, no one with whom he could share the joy of existence. The Creator saw this need and decided to fulfill it. He made Adam fall into a deep sleep, and while he slept, He took one of his ribs. From this rib, He formed the first woman, Eve. She was beautiful, full of grace, shaped with the same perfection with which God had created man himself. When Adam awoke and saw Eve for the first time, his eyes shone. He recognized her as part of himself and exclaimed, "This at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." Thus, the Creator united man and woman, giving them the gift of compassion and love. Together, they lived in Eden, where nothing was lacking. They received a mission, to care for the garden, to rule over the animals, and to multiply to fill the earth. Everything was given to them, except for one restriction. You may eat from all the trees of the garden, except from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for in the day you eat of it, you shall surely die. Adam and Eve accepted the command and lived in peace, enjoying communion with God and the abundance of the garden. But paradise was about to be shaken by a great deception. In the shadows of Eden, an evil presence lurked. Satan, a fallen angel, hated the perfection of creation and plotted its ruin. Disguised as a cunning serpent, he approached Eve and, with sweet words, sowed doubt in her heart. "Did God really say you can't eat from any of the trees in the garden?" asked the serpent. Eve, still innocent and without malice, looked at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which stood there, at the center of the garden. Its sturdy trunk, with lush leaves, seemed to exude a mysterious energy. "We may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, God said we shall not eat nor touch it, lest we die," she replied, her voice trembling, uncertain. She already felt something stirring within her, a growing curiosity. The serpent smiled, its penetrating gaze fixing on her as if reading her thoughts. "You shall not surely die, for God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil," it said, its voice soft but full of seduction. "Isn't that what everyone desires? To be like God, to know what He knows?" Eve became thoughtful. What the serpent said didn't seem so wrong. After all, the fruit was so beautiful. The promise of wisdom, of understanding, was tempting. "But God said we would die," Eve murmured, but her doubt grew with each word from the serpent. "Die?" The serpent hissed softly. "That's a lie, Eve. God only fears that you will become powerful, that you will possess the knowledge He has. He wants to keep you in ignorance." Eve looked at Adam, who was near, watching her with a calm demeanor, but her mind began to question the serpent's words. He had always been so faithful to God, but what if the serpent was right? What if the knowledge of good and evil was truly something good? Doubt consumed her, and without hesitation, Eve reached out, took the fruit, and brought it to her lips. The taste was sweet, delicious, more than she had imagined. She felt an explosion of sensations, a subtle understanding spreading throughout her body. Eve looked at Adam, her eyes shining with the flame of new wisdom. "Adam," she called softly, almost hypnotically. "Eat, try it. There is no more fear. There is no more death." Adam hesitated for a moment, his heart torn between loyalty to the Creator and the temptation to know the unknown. But in the end, he gave in. He took the fruit from Eve's hands and brought it to his mouth. The moment he did, both of them felt a change within. It was as if an invisible door had opened, revealing a new and frightening world. Their eyes were opened, and the light of paradise seemed to fade. For the first time, they felt shame. Their bodies were naked, and a sense of vulnerability overtook them. They ran to hide, but the pain in their hearts was greater than the shame of their exposed bodies. "Adam, where are you?" The Creator's voice called, echoing softly through the garden. Adam stood up, feeling lost, not knowing what to say. He could no longer face God with the same confidence. "I'm here," he replied, his voice heavy with sadness. God appeared before them, his gaze filled with sorrow and understanding. "Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you not to eat?" His voice was low but full of weight. Adam looked at Eve and, with a deep sigh, answered, "The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the fruit, and I ate." God turned to Eve and asked, "What is this you have done?" Ashamed, Eve spoke in a trembling voice, still stunned by what she had done. "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." God looked at both of them with deep sorrow. He then pronounced the judgment. "The serpent shall be cursed above all animals. It shall crawl on its belly and be a symbol of deception. To Eve, I will increase your pain in childbearing, and your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. And to Adam, the ground is cursed because of you, and you shall labor with the sweat of your brow for food." God turned to Adam and Eve with a look of compassion and said, "You shall now know what suffering, pain, and death are, but at the same time there is hope. From the seed of Eve, one shall be born who will crush the head of the serpent and restore what was lost." Adam and Eve remained silent, absorbing the weight of God's words. They couldn't fully understand, but the promise of redemption held them up. With heavy hearts, God clothed them in skins of animals and then ordered them to leave. "The garden shall no longer be your home. You must go so that humanity, through your pain and repentance, may find the way back to paradise. But it will not be easy, and the path shall be guarded." And so Adam and Eve walked out of Eden, the weight of the fall upon their shoulders. At the gates of the garden, God placed cherubim with flaming swords, turning in all directions, guarding the way to the tree of life. As they left, Eve looked back, her heart torn by the loss. "Will we ever return?" she asked, tears in her eyes. Adam embraced her, knowing their journey had only just begun. "We don't know, but the hope is ours, and one day, God's promise will be fulfilled." Adam and Eve walked, their feet tired and their hearts heavy, into a world that seemed barren and lifeless. Eden, which they had known, was now only a distant memory. Eve knelt in the dry earth, feeling the harshness of the soil beneath her hands. "How will we survive here, Adam?" she asked, her gaze lost. Adam looked at her and, with a sigh, replied, "We don't know, Eve, but together we'll find the way." And so they began to rebuild life, one day at a time. But the pain of the fall followed them. In the silence of the night, Eve wondered if God's promise would ever be fulfilled. As the months passed, the pain of the expulsion from Eden remained deep, but in the midst of the hardship, a new life was born to Adam and Eve, a son whom they named Cain. Later, a second son was born, Abel. Cain grew strong, a farmer who worked the earth, while Abel became a shepherd, tending the flocks. Despite their different paths, the brothers loved one another, though a shadow was already cast over their hearts. As the years passed, Cain and Abel each grew into their roles, becoming men of the earth and the flocks. One day, both brothers brought offerings to the Lord, Cain, the fruits of his labor in the fields, and Abel, the best of his flock, a lamb without blemish. Cain presented his offerings with pride, but the Lord did not look upon them with favor. Abel's offering, however, was accepted by God, who was pleased with the heart and sacrifice behind it. This filled Cain with a deep and bitter jealousy, for he had worked hard for his harvest, yet it was his brother who received the Lord's approval. Cain's jealousy festered like a poison, twisting his heart. His mind grew clouded with anger and resentment, until one day, when the opportunity arose, he confronted Abel in the field. "Why does God accept you and reject me?" Cain asked, his voice sharp with hurt. Abel, gentle and kind, tried to soothe his brother. "Cain, if you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." But Cain's heart was already too full of darkness. Instead of listening to his brother, he became enraged. In a moment of violence, he struck Abel down, and in the silence of the field, the first murder in the world was committed. God, who had seen all, came to Cain, asking the question, "Where is your brother Abel?" Cain, with cold indifference, responded, "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" But God's voice was filled with sorrow as he spoke again. What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood. You will no longer be able to grow crops, and you will wander the earth as a fugitive. Cain trembled with fear, for the weight of his sin was too much for him to bear. He said, "My punishment is more than I can bear. You have driven me from the land, and I will be hidden from your face. I will be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and anyone who finds me will kill me." God, in his mercy, placed a mark upon Cain to protect him, saying, "If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold." Cain then went away from the presence of the Lord, wandering the land of Nod, east of Eden. But despite the curse, God did not abandon him completely. Cain built a city and named it after his son, Enoch, marking the beginning of a new chapter for humanity, even though it was now stained with the consequences of sin. As time passed, Cain's descendants grew, and their lives became a mixture of innovation and darkness. Cain's son Enoch became the first to build a city. Other descendants of Cain became skilled in various trades. Jabal, the father of those who live in tents and raise livestock. Jubal, the father of all who play the harp and flute, and Tubal-Cain, a master of forging tools from bronze and iron. But in the hearts of Cain's descendants, the shadow of sin remained. They did not turn back to God, and as their lineage continued, violence, pride, and arrogance filled the earth. The descendants of Cain became known for their wickedness, as their creations and advancements often served their own glory rather than honoring God. Meanwhile, Adam and Eve, in the pain of their loss, were given another son. This son, whom they named Seth, was a gift of hope, for Eve said, "God has appointed another seed for me instead of Abel, whom Cain killed." Seth grew, and in him, the image of God was seen once again. His descendants began to call on the name of the Lord, and they lived in a way that honored him. It was through Seth's line that the righteous lineage of humanity would continue, a line that would eventually lead to Noah, the man chosen to save mankind from the coming flood. The book of the generations of Adam was passed down through the ages. Adam lived to be 930 years old, and he saw many generations of his children. He witnessed the birth of Seth, Enosh, and many others. In his later years, he fathered many more sons and daughters. Though Adam had known paradise and had walked with God, he now experienced the passing of time, the toll of age, and the suffering that came from living in a fallen world. Through Seth and his descendants, the faith in the Creator was carried forward, and they lived with a different understanding than the children of Cain. The righteous sought God, knowing that he would one day restore what had been lost in the Garden of Eden. As the years went by, Adam's descendants continued to live in the tension between the promise of redemption and the reality of sin. The world became more and more filled with corruption and violence, but God never abandoned his people. His promise to send a Savior to crush the head of the serpent was still alive in the hearts of the faithful, and one day, a new hope would rise. In the distant future, a child would be born of a woman, a child who would live without sin, heal the broken, and in the ultimate act of love, lay down his life for the redemption of all. This child would be the fulfillment of God's promise to restore humanity and bring them back to the paradise lost so long ago. But for now, the world waited. It was a world marked by both sorrow and hope, as mankind continued to struggle between the choices of good and evil.